Hello friends, myself Gina Mistry from Catalyst Classes. So today we are going to start with the first chapter of your 11th standard syllabus, that is the living world. Now, when you listen to the term the living world, we need to first understand that what exactly is living. There are different aspects on which the living term is being discussed. It can be spirituality also as well as scientific also. Here we are going to only discuss about the scientific base of what exactly is living. Now when I say living, there can be different characteristics that can define the living creature, right? We can separate, how can we say that a particular thing is living and the other thing is non-living, depending upon certain characteristics. So when you want to answer the question, what is living, we have to discuss certain characteristics, certain points or certain features which are going to demarcate between what exactly can be called as a living thing. So the first topic of this chapter includes characteristics of living. Here we are going to study about certain characteristics. We are actually going to define certain properties which are specific only for the living beings and not for the non-living beings. The first property or condition, when I say that a particular thing is living, we can understand that yes, might be that thing is growing and so we can call it as living. So the first characteristics we are going to discuss upon is growth. Now, when you talk about growth, it can be in two terms. Growth can take place in two terms. It can either be growth in cellular mass, growth due to mass, and or you can say basically increase in mass of a particular thing. The second thing can be growth due to cell division, or you can say basically only division. And what is that division going to lead in? Increase in number, right? So that growth can either be with increase in mass or with increase in number. We are going to discuss about both these aspects, and ultimately we will come to know that whether growth can be called as a characteristic or a defining property of living or not. When you talk about growth in terms of mass, right? Mass is increase in the overall accumulation of the materials of a particular thing. So when I talk about growth in mass, it can take place even in non-living as components also. For example, mountains. They do grow in, mountains being non-living things, still they grow in size. How does that take place? Because when you consider a mountain, there is always deposition of materials or elements and compounds taking place on the outer side. And when these materials or compounds are going to accumulate for years and years, what happens is there is increase in the size, or you can say height of the mountain. So actually, if I say mountain is non-living, still it shows growth. But again, you need to remember here that the growth that takes place in mountains is on the outside. It is just deposition of the materials on the surface of mountains, right? Mountain, of course, is not going to increase in number. Okay, it is going to take years and years when certain tectonic plates, they are going to shuffle, and if something emerges out, there is rise in the level of the land. When you talk about living organisms or living, a particular cell, when you talk about a cell, it does grow in mass as well. If this is the original size of the cell, it is of course going to accumulate materials and the size of the cell can increase. So what you can say here, the cell which is increasing in size is because there is change, or you can say accumulation of materials. Like there is accumulation of biomolecules, all the molecules which are making a cell a living component. So the growth here takes place from inside. The growth takes place from inside. And when the cell has gained a particular size, it is going to divide to increase its number, right? So what you can say is that growth is a characteristic of living, agreed, because the growth is taking place from inner side, where the cell is increasing in mass as well as later on it is dividing to increase its number. But growth does take place in non-living things like mountains also, where the materials are deposited on the outer side. So what you can conclude from here is growth is not a defining property of living. It is a characteristic, right? Because of course living beings, they are also dividing, they are also increasing in mass, they are also increasing in number, but it cannot be called as a defining property. Characteristic can be common to both living and non-living. Defining property is a term that can be used when that particular feature is common only to a particular thing. But here what we see, growth takes place in non-living as well as living. So it is not a defining property. The second characteristic that you can consider for of a living is reproduction. Second property is reproduction. Now again, what is reproduction? It is basically a process by which the organisms, they increase the number of that particular species, right? So generally, if you know, reproduction is always going to take place in living organisms only. A table or a chair is not itself going to divide itself or replicate itself to increase its number, right? So of course, you know that reproduction cannot occur in non-living materials or things. A table or a chair, as I said, is not going to itself divide, right? So reproduction is not taking place in non-living things. There are many living organisms which divide by different modes. For example, if you take yeast and hydra, they reproduce or increase their number. Simply now here also reproduction will be increase in number. And why does the organism increase their number? So that the species can survive on earth. So yeast and hydra, you see, they divide by budding. Take example of planaria, an organism again of animal kingdom, it regenerates. That is also a mode of reproduction in it. Spirogyra, an algae, it divides by fragmentation. Like there are many other examples where you will see that there are different modes by which the organisms, they reproduce or increase their number. If you talk about prokaryotic cells, or if you talk about bacteria, these are the organisms basically in which cell division is itself a mode of reproduction. The reason being, these organisms are single-celled. So the single-celled organism, when it divides, it is again a mode of reproduction because that is only going to increase their number. Whereas when you talk about multicellular organism, a single cell dividing cannot be considered as reproduction. So looking up to this point, we can understand that reproduction is a characteristic of living. It is not a characteristic of non-living. But again, there are exceptions. There are certain organisms, like you will see mules, then worker honeybees, and you can also find infertile couples. These are certain organisms which do not reproduce. They are living. They are living. Mule is a living organism. Honeybees are living. Human beings are living, right? But this infertile human couples, mules and honeybees, they do not reproduce because of any kind of natural, genetic makeup problem inside the body. So they do not reproduce. Hence, you can here again say that reproduction is again not a defining property, right? If it would have been defining property, these organisms should also have reproduced. But they are living, still they are not reproducing. That means reproduction is not a defining property of living organisms. Third property can be considered as metabolism or the cellular organization. Living organisms, or basically you have studied in lower classes, cell is called as the structural and functional unit of life. The reason it carries out different functions, right? Now, there are different types of chemical reactions that are taking place in a cell, and all those chemical reactions collectively they can be termed as metabolic reactions, and the phenomenal process is called as metabolism. There can be breaking reactions like catabolism, or there can be complex molecule formation reactions which will be termed as anabolism. But either of the two, it can never take place in a non-living substance. If you cut the bark of a tree and make a table or whatever from it, that non-living thing is not, the cells of that are not going to further show these chemical reactions, right? So you can say that chemical reactions, metabolism or cellular organization can take place only in living organisms, because when different cells they will come together, they are going to form tissue, and tissue is going to form organ system later on. So the hierarchy will be maintained. That is not going to take place in non-living creatures, non-living organisms. Again, when you talk about chemical reactions, then a question can arise. There are chemical reactions going on with advancement of science. There are different metabolic reactions which are also taking place in the lab. In lab also I can mix carbon dioxide and water in which I can get glucose, which is a type of photosynthetic reaction. Then why is metabolism a characteristic of living, and why not of that of non-living? The reason is chemical reactions, they do take place outside the body, but they are not, that does not make the reaction live. It is just mimicking the condition that is present inside the body. So those systems, those reactions, they will not be called as, they will not result into giving formation to a new organism. They are just called as live reactions instead of live organisms. So here what you can conclude is, yes, metabolism is a defining property of living organisms. The fourth property that you should learn or know is consciousness. Organisms, they respond to the change in environment. Increasing heat, we do respond. Even bacteria, they do respond, right? Multicellular organism, unicellular organism, any organism which is going to show a response to the change in environment. You can say respond to a particular stimuli. And what is stimuli? And change that is taking place in the environment, a factor that is affecting the body of an organism will be called as the stimuli. So consciousness is nothing but an ability to respond to a particular stimuli. If you talk about plants, they do respond. How? They show the phenomenon of phototropism, hydrotropism, they show photoperiodism. So what exactly is happening in all these processes? Basically, the plant is responding to a particular change in the environment, a particular action in the environment. Like here in case of phototropism, the plant is going to grow in terms of when receives light. Hydrotropism, the roots are going to grow towards the soil when water is supplied to it. So plants, they do have the ability to respond, as well as animals. We do have the mechanism of reflex action, wherein if a particular person is pinching you, or you get hurt, or you touch something hot, you know how to respond. You will either remove your hand or you will walk away from them. So all these is what? Consciousness, the ability to know that yes, in what way you need to respond to a particular stimuli. The same thing can never happen with non-living thing. A table or chair, you put anything on it, you drag it, you do anything, it does not respond to you against that. You shift table from here to there, you put it in heat, it is not going to walk by itself and move into the shape, right? So response to stimuli is not a characteristic that is found in any kind of living organism. And so we can say that yes, consciousness is a defining property of living. So in this lecture, we have discussed about what can be the defining properties or characteristics of living, where we have discussed about the 4 characteristics. First was growth, second is reproduction, third is metabolism, and fourth is consciousness. Out of that, by studying or analyzing the conditions, we have concluded that growth and reproduction, they are just the characteristics of living, but they cannot be called as the defining properties. Whereas consciousness and metabolism are the 2 characteristics which are defining properties of only living. No non-living or thing is going to show these characters. Thank you.